welcome all instructors and enthusiasts for all around the world. I welcome in particular all our ITF official Grandmasters, Masters. My name is Gerardo Rosell, and together with Master Florencia Manifesto, will be your moderator for this session. Florencia.
Yeah, hi and hello to everyone. I'm happy to have you all here joining this big event. Today is a truly historic day, April 11, 2025, marking 70 years of Taekwondo. Whether you are joining us from Asia, Europe, the Americas, Africa, or Oceania, we are honored to have you here for this 24-hour global online celebration. Taekwondo is more than just a martial art. It is a philosophy, a way of life, and a force that unites people across cultures, languages, and generations. From the moment General Choi Hong-hee founded Taekwondo in 1955, it has spread to every corner of the world, empowering millions through discipline, perseverance, and indomitable spirit. And today, as we celebrate over 7 decades of this martial art, it is not coincidence that this event lasts 24 hours, just like the 24 patterns of Taekwondo, each pattern representing the 24 hours of a day, symbolizing the entirety of a life dedicated to self-improvement, learning, and perseverance. What to expect? Within 24 hours of this online celebration event, you will experience insightful discussions, training sessions, and stories from Taekwondo legends. Our esteemed speaker will explore the rich history of the art and the exciting future that lies ahead. Whether you are here to learn, connect, or simply to be inspired, this is the event for you.
The next pattern is the 14th pattern, is Chuche. Was an amazing performance of Chuche tool. It's very complicated tool. We love Chuche tool, but this performance is very good. The next speaker are Adrian Byrne and Richie Forde. The title of this session is ITF Sparring Analysis, What Numbers Matter.
Hi everybody, my name is Master Adrian Byrne. With me we have Mr. Richie Forde. We are together TKD Coach Academy, and we're very, very privileged to be able to do this little bit of work for the 70th anniversary celebration of the introduction of the name Taekwondo and General Choi's Taekwondo to the world in 1955. So for today we've been asked to do a little bit of an expose on the numbers that really matter in the study of ITF sparring competition. We're going to look at what percentages, what work rates, and all of those kind of things that emerge as you watch multiple matches, record and tag those events, and how we can use those as coaches to inform ourselves better about the strategies and the tactics that are working in ITF Taekwondo. And then also how we can, as coaches, look to improve the effectiveness of our competitors, but based on real data that we're seeing over an awful lot of matches. So Richie, do you want to explain what it is that we're going to look at in today's presentation?
Yeah, so our attempt here at Moneyball, that movie about American baseball, if you have seen that, it's how can we get some statistics together and see if there's any trends to what is success in ITF sparring. So today's fight is an action-packed fight between James Chute and Bijan Nabernik from Slovenia. And that was in last year's European Championships, minus 69 kg senior male quarter-final. So this match is actually worthy to be a final any other time. Great fight. Some really good stats to back it up too. Some stats that we don't actually see fit the trend. So we're going to talk through those. We're going to go through every single number that we think may be important. Now, maybe there are some numbers that are included here as well that we need to include. We have to apologize. Myself and Adrian are actually a little bit unwell at the moment. Our voices are struggling. So we'll have a few squeaks throughout this episode for sure. But yeah, that's the fight we're going to be looking at. We're going to have a look what's important, why the eventual winner got the nod and why he won, and what are things that we can learn from that. And also some talking points of things that both these guys do particularly well.
Okay, Richie, and with that, let's invite everybody to sit back, relax, and enjoy this fight. It was an absolute belter, and we'll talk through it as we go.
Okay, so as a start here, we'll just have a few overlays to let you guys know what are the terms we're using for each thing. So right off the bat, we see both these guys with the front leg trying to create and dominate space. Restart's already a massive feature, only a couple of seconds in, and we already see there's a big opportunity to come and expose your opponent on restarts.
We can see as well that neither competitor is willing to give an awful lot of space off of that front leg. So they're very active in actually making contact. There's not what we call much of an empty carry. And that would be where you're lifting your leg and using the threat of a kick to take back space that's been given up as you've conceded to space to your opponent. So both are looking to interact directly with the front leg wherever they can, either actively trying to get a score with it, or on the opposite side, trying to counter or disrupt the front leg so that they're not conceding space. So this is a very high interactivity match.
Yeah, so right here we see some great interaction. One of the things we try to track is who's first into contact and who's last out of contact. And so far we see both these guys are trying to get that clear entry shot. And they're very well able to match the exchange like we see here and then try find that exit shot. It's not very easy in this particular match because both guys are very crafty and they're not given the opportunity to get that clear exit shot. So we call it exit shot as you exit the exchange or the contact to be able to come out with the big exclamation mark for yourself. Usually a turning kick after hands is the most common one we see.
So we're seeing some of the elements of control as well, and the guys will be jostling to take control of the ring position, so very often they'll want to be in the centre pushing out, though James Chute never minds being on the outside edge of the ring a little bit, lets him pull and counter to some degree. Both are trying to have a control of the distance between themselves, and both are looking to also control the tempo of the match, so you know, the rhythm of the match as a whole. And one of the things that we really do see in this match is both guys want to spar at a slightly closer distance than an awful lot of people would be comfortable with, which means that they have to respond to almost all of the first intentions. So in other words, when somebody starts to move, the other person is really invited to respond to it. And that means that we have very quick decisions being taken, and quite a lot of errors. So there will be some unforced errors as well, because both competitors are trying to react and trying to take an advantage from the very first lifting of the leg, the very first threat of the hands. And we don't always see that across all divisions.
Yeah, so far we see a little bit of a style difference. We see Bijan has a bit more of a lean back and extends to find the maximum distance on his front leg, where James tends to have the more upright body position because he looks to switch over to the head a lot. So far that's doing him justice, giving him a 4-0 lead. Something to notice, there's a little bit of discrepancy in some of the scores. Some are quite close, some have a little bit more, let's say, leeway, being able to score the hands more maybe, or maybe there's just a bit more action in those particular areas. And that's why warnings are so important, because no matter what referee sees what, the warnings are effective on every single scorecard. We see a nice reversal here as well from James, which you will look at a little bit later on.
Yeah, and as you've said, the warnings also lead to this the restarts of the match. So every warning creates a stoppage, creates a restart, and we typically see about 12 restarts across the whole match. But that's a little bit of a concentration check and a gut check for, okay, are you willing to do something positive now to take control of the match situation? It's also a little bit of a moment to have a look at the scoreboard and see what should I be doing. And there's a couple of things that we can see here. The scoreboard gets quite complicated at times because there are some quick changes in terms of the who's in the lead. And then also the warning situation. So every third warning, there's a pretty dramatic change on the scoreboard. And you can often see the guys just kind of throwing a glance as they come back to position and look at the scoreboard. James, under a little bit more pressure that way because of the high number of warnings.
Yeah, and we do know from the stats that we've covered so far in lots of episodes on our YouTube channel that if you go over the 6 warnings, you tend to have a less favourable chance of winning the fight. So right now he's in the driving seat, so we'll see how this plays out. But so far, we see 30 seconds left. He's still winning 2-0, and he's trying to increase his score and to get a couple of more scores on the board to give him a little bit of space to just have that breathing room to be able to just to move around and close it out. But then we see a quick switch. So these matches can quickly flip, and that's where it's so important to be able to read the game state incredibly quick. Here, we have 9 seconds left, and it appears James is in the lead 2-1. Extremely close match, but you'll see here on the restart here, which is a very important moment, that one of the referees obviously made an error and they quickly adjust because they can't right now, the time is paused, and now it quickly goes to 1-1, and that changes everything with such a short amount of time left. It's now a draw. The intention changes. Byrne goes for it, gets a turning kick nice and clear, and steals the win.
And I just want to roll back that little bit. If you watch, even from slightly before this, watch both coaches. So when it comes here, you can see with the number of seconds remaining, both coaches will have a good clear look at the scoreboard after that warning just to see what the game state is. So they're having a good look, and then it comes back to the actual restart, and you'll see neither of the coaches nor the competitors have the opportunity to see the change in that game state. So they're still playing out that the 2-1 game state, which has Slovenia pushing, and it has Ireland in a position where, not that he's not trying to fight it, but that he thinks it's a draw, going into that last few seconds. Really, really, really critical stuff when it comes up like that. Nobody's made any mistakes. That's just how quickly the scoreboard can change and how alert to it you have to be. It's almost inhuman. So
yeah, that's what this episode's all about. Really looking at the numbers, and these are numbers that are vital. You see how quickly it changed, and one guy is out in the quarterfinal, one guy goes all the way on, and he actually goes to the final in the end. But we see, if we look at the scores here quickly, 9-9, 6-6, 19-15 and 13-11, they're quite close in terms of the numbers. Maybe one is a little bit far away from the other, but generally they're close enough with a point of each other potentially, or a score within each other. So it's a little bit of something, let's just say it's something to be aware of, that we don't want to always be focused on this. But if you notice that one referee might be very lenient on giving scores for hands, maybe that's something that you have to change your strategy towards, and maybe to exploit that. You might notice a particular referee, particular ring on one of the scorecards is given higher value for a technique. Sometimes we can see lots of hands or punches being traded and not getting that return, but some referees will like that and they will click nearly every single shot. So that's something that you can be aware of if you're a coach or if you're a competitor watching from ring to ring, something that you can pick on in terms of the numbers. What do people like in each ring?
Yeah, and so what we will try to do at the end of these matches then is look at, we want to watch the match as a whole, see what the rhythm was, see how the fight went, what were the patterns, what tactics did people choose. And then, like Richie made reference to at the beginning, there's a certain Moneyball element to it, where can we figure out, if we look at enough matches, what do the numbers mean? And we've across the YouTube channel gone through 70 or 80 finals from European, World, Pan American Championships, World Cups, so all of the biggest events. So we're not taking stats from big one-sided matches that happened in round one. We're taking all of our stats from the tail end of the tournament, where this is the best that we have in the particular event, going head to head and trying to take that gold medal. And so that gives us a very different type of statistic. Much smaller number of matches, but much more impactful in terms of what's actually working at the very, very top level of the game. So the first thing we're going to look at here is the shot counts, and a very important thing to understand as we do that is the difference between a contact and a score. So we don't look to see if a judge gave a score, because it's very hard, and one judge could give a score, another might not. So we're really only looking at when a technique makes contact with some part of the other person, and we'll count that as a contact, whereas the attempt is just a shot was thrown. So Richie, anything standing out to you from the type of shots thrown here or the success rate?
Well, the first thing is the front leg carry. It's something that, let's clarify what we mean by that. It's lifting that front leg and initiating forward. We don't really know what the shot's going to be yet, but it's an attempt to bring your front leg into contact in any way. So usually we see it in the side kick chamber position, for example. In the female side, we see this is very, very high. They use it to control space. They use it to set up all their shots from the front leg. But here, particularly from Byrne, he actually uses a real dominant, pushing, aggressive side kick instead of a front leg carry. So that's excuse me, that's the first thing that we see that really stands out. It's not something that is very common. The other is the amount that axes from James. He is very unique in terms of the shots that he uses, and we don't see this one being used as often. If you're throwing 10 or 11 of these and you're landing 5 or 6, for example, there's a good chance if you land 1 or 2, that's going to be very, very valuable, being the highest return, being 3 points for a headshot. So if you can have this in your game, it's going to actually be a get out of jail card a lot of the time, and it can be very effective. And we'll actually look how he uses it very effectively, particularly on restarts, and in how you can have a strategy on restarts to be able to use particular shots at different times. Other than that, I think the hands, generally they were matched by both guys, which also links into the Dolio-Chagi. That was pretty much consistent from both, balanced each other out a little bit there. The front leg carry much lower on James's side. He goes more direct with his shots. So yeah, I think the story of this one was the axe of James versus the sidekick of Byrne.
So as we look at the raw numbers for everything, we can see that James has made 33 contacts versus Byrne's 40. And this is a really important number we found over many, many matches. There's been only one match, one final that we've looked at where the person who made less contacts was the winner. So it's been a very, very consistent statistic. If you make even non-scoring contact more often than your opponent, it almost always works out in your favor. And I mean, intuitively, I suppose we'd assume that makes some sense. But then you need to know how many contacts are typically made across a match. And when we look at finals across all weight classes, across male and female, what we find is that winners tend to make about 54 attacks, 21 contacts, and the losers in finals tend to make about 42 attempts and 18 contacts. So we can see right away that both fighters are well above the normal success rate that you'd find in a final. So Richie, what do you make of that?
Yeah, that's what you'd expect from both of these guys, because both of these guys have been consistently medaling at international championships. Byrne was actually European champion and world champion, I think, as a junior this previous year, and this was his first senior event. So they're no strangers to a high output level of sparring. So obviously that portrays true on what they do. So 71 is a ridiculous contact rate, and obviously you need to have the conditioning, the mental conditioning as well, to be able to back that. And to be able to do that consistently through rounds is not easy. But that's where we see fights come down to the last 10 seconds in this case, because that work rate is so high that James was dominating this fight for the majority, I would say a good 80%. And then because of that extra work rate from Byrne, I think that really gives him an opportunity at the end of the fight. Of course, a very telling stat here as well is the 10 warnings for James. We do know that if you combine these two stats together, if you have the higher contact rate, and what we've actually found as a sweet spot is 50 as the number of attempted shots in over the both rounds of the 2 minutes. So over the 4 minutes, if you can put 50 on your opponent, and you can also have a warning count of lower than 6, you tend to have a 97% chance of winning the fight. So the two big stats from this slide show up again as numbers that we have to pay attention to. We're not saying that this is a guaranteed way to success, but definitely the trend does favor having a low warning count and having a very high contact. You're going to put yourself in the driving seat.
Okay, so one of the things to look at as well in this one, and really impressed me, was that the contact rate is almost a measure of efficiency, because it's very, very simply the number of contacts you made divided by the number of attempts. So what that means is we're looking at, of the number of attempts, what's the percentage chance that one of those actually made contact with the opponent. And normally, whether winning or losing, that rate's at about 40% in finals. So both of these guys are overshooting that efficiency rate, which basically means if they move, they're probably going to hit you with something, which is in itself a kind of a scary statistic. And then just in relation to the restarts that we've mentioned down at the bottom, this is an important thing as well. Now, we didn't actually include, because it's been a little while since we've done one of these, we didn't include the beginning of the match or the beginning of the second round in the number of restarts we counted. So 15 is actually the number we should have here, but 12 is typical across all of the finals, and even if we go into lower level matches, 12 restarts is pretty typical. So start of the first round, start of the second round, all of the warnings, all of the fouls, and any stops or injury or anything else, it averages about 12, which means in 240 seconds of competitive sparring, you are likely to have to focus on, well, what's important to do now at least 12 times. And that's 12 times if you can take an advantage, or 12 times your opponent can take an advantage. And really importantly, and we'll see it in some of the clips, these guys clashed on almost all of the restarts. So in other words, both people looked to start with a positive attacking shot. And really, that was that's quite remarkable. We don't always see that happening either.
No, we don't, and particularly with the leg. So usually we see different variations. Some people will move, some people will lift the leg, some people will go with hands. But we see both these guys favouring the leg, and we look at that in more detail later on. But here we see the average flag score is quite high. It's not the typical amount of scores we see. And of course, that makes sense because of the amount of output they're putting out and their contact rate percentage as well. And of course, there was one particular flag in this fight which was pretty high, which is going to pull up the average as well.
So what we've got here, we're looking at, the number of scores, what all four judges gave divided by 4 for each person, and obviously one is the inverse of the other. And then we have the safety margin being, on average across all of the cards, how many points was the difference. That links into the one we have in the bottom right hand corner there, which is how many flags are in play. And we look at that just to see at the end of the match, would one score, or potentially a warning, but generally would one score have been enough on any one of these scorecards to bring the match in the opposite direction. So at the end of this match, there was three judges still available for a last second score, let's say, or in this case it wouldn't have been a warning, but a last second score might have done it. Actually, in fairness, a warning to Bien would have made a difference there at the end as well.
Yes, he had 2, yeah.
He had 2. In terms of technique variety, both competitors have had 7 different techniques used as we classified them, and normally, again, looking at it as we do, 6 is pretty typical. So they pulled at least one more shot out of the bag than we might normally see. Richie, do you want to talk about that last little number in terms of the first in, last in contact?
Yeah, so generally what we've been seeing is the big exclamation point at the end of an exchange is what referees tend to reward as of late. And we've seen that. That's just something that we're keeping an eye on the fights that we've done. But we noticed in this one, both guys were pretty clinical with their entry shot. So their first shot into contact, James was first in 10 times and Bien was first in 16 times. So we see that was something that got a good return, particularly with the kicks. So we've seen a lot of that as well. We didn't see a big shot coming away too often. We see one big turning kick for James, and I think 2 big turning kicks for Bien coming out of hands. So they were the big moments for coming out of contact with a big shot. But that's an interesting stat for us because what we've seen the trend lean towards is usually it's the other way around. The person who has a big lasting contact value is actually the person who is getting the nice return from the referees. But these guys pretty clinical with their first entry shot. And I think as well, that comes down to the fact that both of these guys were matching each other in the middle part of the exchange and generally matching each other on that exit shot out of the exchange as well. So it really came down to whoever got that first in got that nice clear return generally, bar maybe 2 or 3 exchanges in this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did say that earlier, that when the guys are starting off their attacks, they're already at a distance where contact is possible. They're not having to carry across a big distance, and the other person isn't typically backing up or withdrawing off of it. They're going to try and interact with that initial lift. And what that means is you're either successful and you've managed to set a rhythm or a tempo or break your opponent's rhythm and make a contact. We saw that, as you said, once or twice with maybe a hacks from James or a side kick from Bien. But if you get it wrong, we saw the opposite. So we saw both guys go through that front leg turning kick. We saw that lead hand taking down the side kick so we could get in with a counter. We saw a few attempts at either a reverse turning kick against the hacks or the front leg turning kick. So we saw things like that. And those are high risk, high reward, in that sometimes you'll get it quite wrong and the side kick spears you and you have that long straight leg and a 2-point score for the person throwing the side kick. On the opposite end of that, if you do get it right, you've gone straight past that side kick with a very big visual score with a punch to the head. So, the guys are playing those high stakes, high rewards kind of sparring, which not everybody has it in them to do. It's not everybody's style, but both of these guys brought that same style to the match. So we saw 1 or 2 maybe, I think, unusual things in the stats because of that, particularly on that first in, first out kind of number.
Yeah, another factor as well is we really highlighted the warnings, and that's essentially what lost this fight for James because he had 3 deductions across all 4 cards. But a lot of the warnings in this fight weren't particularly, let's say, his error that caused it. Sometimes he exited the ring, yes, that's his error. But sometimes it was both these guys coming into contact and just hand placement and things like that, getting one of the fighters in trouble. And sometimes that can be something that just the center referee has a particular gripe with something, how you hold your hand, how you maybe perceive to hold, etc. So it's very, very important as well, and this is difficult, but it's very important to pick up on these things early in a fight. And if you notice that something that continues to get you in trouble with the referee, for whatever reason, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. You should look to adjust. And I think that's very, very difficult, but it is the difference between winning and losing in these very, very high level, close battles. So if we go back over this fight, I'm sure you'll find a couple of moments where warnings went either way that you could have said, okay, maybe that could have went the other way as well. And in the end of the match, let's say that was actually the reason why James lost. So you have to try pick up on those moments if possible and try recognize what are the things that are going to keep you out of trouble from the referee.
And I suppose just for anyone who's not used to listening to us or hasn't been listening to us on our YouTube channel previously, know that we treat warnings as a fractional score. So you have to start to look at warnings as a score on the scoreboard. They don't all add up right away, but they're highly impactful because they go onto each of the 4 scorecards. So treat a warning as a fractional score. And the same thing in terms of the way the techniques are. So we know a punch is 1 point and a kick to the body is 2 and a kick to the head is 3. No, that's not really how it works. So you have to also multiply that by who sees it. So the impact on an individual judge's scorecard of, let's say, a kick to the head might be really significant because 3, maybe even 4 judges might see that kick to the head, or a jumping punch to the head could get 1 point from even 4 judges. Whereas the most beautifully executed back kick as you exit the ring might be seen by 1 judge and you get 2 points on 1 card. And you'll feel very aggrieved because your timing was beautiful. You set it up, you laid the trap, you've sprung the trap, you've done everything right. They're clutching their guts and it landed beautifully and you've got 2 points to show on 1 scorecard and it hasn't changed everything. If you're more new to this, or if you're looking at how the scores go for the, because you haven't done an awful lot on the electronic scoreboards, you need to get used to how this works. The visibility of the score matters a lot, and because it matters so much, the warnings matter an awful lot as well. Those fractional scores, when they add up and that third warning clicks over, it's a big impact because it happens on all four judges simultaneously. So do keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think another point there that is highlighted when we talk about that is, let's say that example of the back kick. It's very rare that a back kick is going to be landed or even thrown, for that matter, in the center of the ring, because usually it's a reactive shot to somebody putting pressure on you, which means you're going to be pushed towards the edge of the ring or towards a corner. So that even highlights that point even more. But as well, an interesting thing that we found is the shots like the back kick, the bande, big shots like this that we don't see as often, they have a much higher contact rate than, let's say, your front leg carry or your more general shots. So you got to play the percentages a little bit there as well. If you do throw it, chances are you're going to make contact with it. And we know that if you do make contact high, that you're going to probably get a return on that of 3 points potentially, which is very, very valuable. But the position of the ring very much at play as well here. Is it in a corner where only one judge can see or not?
Absolutely. So let's have a look at a couple of the talking points from this match. And Richie, you've done a little bit of a job of picking out 2 or 3 things that really stood out from this match in particular. So run the video. You tell me when to hit pause will be pretty good.
Yeah, so we'll have a look at a couple of ideas. So the first one, I just freeze frame here. You see James's foot is higher than Byrne's. He lifts his toes slightly, and a little bit of a theory here, but maybe the lift of Byrne's leg actually propels James's leg higher. So it might be something worth looking at. If you can use the toe up method here to come over, does this help James to lift his hacks kick? Who knows? But we do know that if you go with a side kick here and your front hand is low, like we see the left hand of Byrne, it's very possible with the toes up here for James to come over the top and to score this. This is something that he can do very, very well. We see the second one is the exact same. So the toes are up again. He gets on top, and this one gets a return from at least one referee.
It's an interesting thing for me.
Are very important.
Sorry, Richie. Yeah, absolutely. For what's really interesting for me from a coaching perspective as well, when we look at James, is this is a solution that James has grown into himself over many years. He's not the most flexible guy in the world. If you want to have a traditional middle split type thing, James is not your guy. However, he's adjusted his sparring stance, his style, the position of his front foot and knee in order to be effective. And this is the key thing when it comes to ITF sparring. It's most important to be effective, not necessarily textbook. And so he has a very high toe position. It's not a classical side kick. It's more, it's definitely has an angle to it. But it allows other things. It allows it to be converted into hacks very easily, and he's super effective in landing the hacks. It also means it's very easy for him to follow with hands, because he's always going to land on the open side, or so him kicking with his left leg there, his leg is going to naturally land to the left of his opponent's foot. He's going to be able to bring his backhand into play very easily. So it could be a very, very different thing from how Byrne is built. So the two postures, strategies, preferred kicks and everything that they choose to have can develop organically because of their own natural build. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about sparring as opposed to pattern. You, no matter how you're built, can find a way to make it work for you.
And if you're using a lift and shift and carrying through the space, you have more space to get through, which is easier for James in particular as well, because he has that shorter stance. So it's easy for him to be able to lift that leg over the top from a shorter stance if you're carrying into him. So we always speak about ways to get on top with your leg if both people are kicking. And one of the ways is that you don't shift into your opponent. You let them shift into you, shorten up your stance and lift above them as they're on the way in. So that's one interesting way that we see so far.
So we'll let it play on here again.
Here's just a lovely reversal and slip. It's something that we don't see too often. And then the immediate re-engagement. Let's have a quick chat about re-engagements, Adrian, and the importance of them.
So we might just have one quick look at the reversal. So we have sometimes called an X-ray. There's a few different things that you could call it. And we have, again, that re-engagement. Like, what we're talking about with re-engagement is that there's been an exchange. It's come to a natural finish or break. But remember that any time that there isn't action, that has to be mutually agreed by both people. They both have to decide, hey, we're not actually going to do anything right now. But in that moment of decision where one person decided, okay, we've got a break here, I might just take a couple of bounces, there's an opportunity to do something and take the initiative and then re-engage. So that moment when there is a natural split occurring, if you're the one who makes the decision to go directly back into contact, there's a very high rate of return on that. So just knowing that when we have that little voice in our head that's telling us, okay, I can chill for a second here, I can rest, being the person who decides, no, go back to the well, go back for more, very often works out in your favor.
And I think that that's one of the reasons why we see the first into contact stat being particularly high on this fight, where we noted that usually it's the person last in contact gets the return. But anyway, we'll play through and have a chat through a few different things in this fight as well. So here we see very nice turning kick after hands. So here is an example as well. Yeah, are we going to rerun that one?
Yeah, I'll come back to that one.
So here again, we just see an adjustment from Byrne. He lifts his hand higher here on this one, so he doesn't get hit with the hacks. But here, I love the turning kick from James. This one, he manages to really mix it in. How he gets his leg up at that angle, I don't know. It's a very, very difficult thing to do, being very close, upright with the body position, and just throw that in. So very, very effective way. Here we see the front hand measuring the distance. First time, second time, and then the third time he's able to jump the leg. So notice how he flicks his hand out, just measuring that distance, but also as a backup plan, being able to cover the leg if he needs to, and then on the third attempt as he sucks him in. So maybe we just have a quick chat about pulling people in and sucking people in, Adrian, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so one of the things that's quite interesting is when you're in that position, it's very important to look at where the scoreboard is right now. So James is in a position where Byrne does need to come to him and does need to take the initiative to do something. And when that position on the scoreboard is the scoreboard puts the pressure on. Sometimes it's the personality, but usually it's the scoreboard puts that pressure on. You can start to give a little bit of space and you invite the other person into that space. We're not happy having an empty space in front of us anyway. So as you're giving up a little bit of space, you're inviting your opponent to step in. And then because they're the person making that step, they're the one taking the risk. Do they shorten their stance? Do they transfer the weight onto their front leg? Do they shift with both feet at the same time? Do they kick into it and risk the dropping leg? And what it's doing is there's very little risk to that movement backwards, but there's much greater risk to that shift forward. So as you're pulling, you're also giving the other person some messaging about what they should do. So James, as he backs up there, and we see it a couple of those few times as he's backing away from Byrne, he's inviting a direct shot because he's going directly back. We want to do that. Almost every pad drill you've ever practiced goes in a straight line. So there's an incentive to do that. But equally, you could be inviting the person to follow your lead. So if you're circling out to the right, you're inviting the person to predict where you're going to be after the next step. So you can be ready to go directly forward or change the other direction. Very, very effective way to get hands. Very, very effective way to set up a counter.
Yeah, definitely. And then we'll roll on here. We see another restart. Now look at Byrne's hand. So now his left arm is very high in the air and he's made that adjustment. I would love to know if that's from his coach, Alice Zemlik, or if he's just recognized that himself, that he needs to adjust. So definitely good adjustment from him.
Yeah, and really there is a big question in that. And, but hopefully, well, whether it's come from Byrne or come from Alice or how they've arrived at it, that high hand position, trying to counter James's most natural response to to Byrne's main weapon, that side kick. Yeah, very, very clever. Why not? But everything that you do or you change in that way does obviously afford some more information to the other person. What can James do differently because that hand is there? Obviously, it then means if James wins the front leg battle and gets there first or higher, he's going to be the one that's getting on the hip, and the hip won't be covered. So there is push and pull on it, but absolutely there was a notable adjustment as you went into that second round.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here for people is to have a plan on restarts and don't just bounce and see what happens. So we see the high level guys are always ready on a restart to do something. James here was waiting for the lift of the leg to be able to escape the edge. So we see another reversal opportunity. Here is a lovely one. I really like how these link up and the flow of these shots. the hacks, the dolyochagi, and the back fist just link together so well. If you miss one, you have the next one, and then it sets up the dolyochagi very nicely.
Absolutely, and it's kind of like that attack, counter. If you were trying to set this up as a drill, it would all look very, very lovely. But that, it's been done in a different way, and they're finding the shot that takes the natural rhythm and moves them back into the most natural position. So it's very easy to go front to back. The body is moving as a pendulum, and it's a very, very easy thing to do. But they found a really, really nice sequence there to make that happen. And of course, the effectiveness is they're long shots and very, very clear.
That last side kick from Byrne was actually the thing that brought him back into the match. So it's interesting as well that he didn't give up on his main weapon, and he was trying to be dominant with that side kick there, and he found a home for it. That was something that wasn't working so well at the start of the fight, but he didn't give up on it. He knew that he would find success if he kept going with it. And we know from the numbers that for you to throw 10 shots off that front leg, you might only make contact to score with 4. That's a 40% chance. So he knows he must continue working with that leg and not get disheartened and continue working to find it. And eventually he found a nice clear big shot that got a return.
Again, we're seeing some really, really nice exchanges where both guys are actually finding the turning kicks on the end. And that is in some ways ruining our stat. And I'll leave you talk about that in a second. But it is ruining our stat in terms of the first in, first out, because both guys are either neutralizing each other or they arrive into a clash and they have to be broken by the referee. And it's because neither is actually conceding too much momentum in terms of that space, that distance. They're not falling back from the attack. So the opportunity to find the easy finishing shot is not there most of the time. And they're having to, as you mentioned earlier, find these unusual body positions where they can throw the turning kick, leaning the body to one side, maybe creating a little space, shoving the hips back, and they're finding those shots.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution to this is. Would you be looking to, if you know that you're both going for the turning kick and no one's really getting it, you're just both going for it, but there's no return, do you try to go with that re-engagement technique of pulling out early from contact to immediately re-engage with hands again? Or do you try to set the feet in a way that you can spin and maybe circle around with a band or a back kick when they do throw that turning kick? And that's easier said than done, because when someone's punching the head off you and you have to be able to think of how you're going to set your feet for the next thing that's going to happen is very, very difficult. So if both people cancel each other out with this turning kick as an exit shot after hands, what's the next level strategy to be able to be a step ahead on the chessboard?
Yeah, and I think other than what you've suggested in terms of if you can be the person who creates a bump or a break in it, and then you can use your reverse turning kick or your back kick maybe to preempt the shot, and you're making your exit, you're covering yourself against the shot as you go anyway. The other thing is you can play the other percentage. It's much easier to put that foot against the hip, but if you can throw the body offline and kick from close and reach the head, whether it's the out-in crescent kick or an equivalent shot, we've seen it as well, where if you can get your body offline, you can really swing a straight leg turning kick over the top as well. So something between that out-in crescent kick and the turning kick. That way, at least you're going for the higher risk reward shot as opposed to the one that's easier to put on target.
Yeah, traditionally you would suggest maybe trying to push through, get momentum, and try get them on the back foot. We already seen though that James is able to be on the back foot and still get that turning kick in.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a higher level skill for sure. So I'm sure somebody will come up with a solution to that soon enough when both people start to cancelling out the turning kicks after hands.
This is the one you mentioned earlier, Richie. Do you want to just talk us through the score here?
Yeah, so here we see one of the cards is, I think my theory is that 6-7 was a mistake somehow, and then they took it away to make it 6-6 again.
Yeah,
that is my theory. But because you see the clock is grey, they can't do that. I don't think, at least from my knowledge of the scoreboard.
No, scoring
in
isn't
that
live.
Moment. Yeah, so they have to wait for it to go live. And it's just a shame that it's so close to the end. You're going to have all the people here cheering and shouting. It's impossible to get any information across to your fighter as a coach in this last 10 seconds when everyone is screaming. So, yeah, this second one, 6-7, gets adjusted. So my only theory here is they went to give a point for the jumping back fist of James and then took it back for some reason when he got a warning. But I don't think that was the reason he got a warning. So it's an interesting little talking point. We'll see it here again play through. So let's see what your thoughts are, Adrian. We'll see. I'll get you in time with it here. So here's the jumping back fist. Like, it went over his head.
Yeah.
He didn't get the warning for that, as of my knowledge.
No,
so unless they thought it landed and then took it back.
But the decision could be here. He's jumped and then he's fallen. So he didn't necessarily, he had the loss of balance. So potentially he has the score if he lands on his feet and it's someone that clicked very quickly. But because he has the loss of balance and he picks up the warning, it's not actually the score. So he didn't land on his feet. So it could easily be that. And the judge could have been so incredibly precise and put it on the score and taken it off right away. But if the clock has stopped before you hit that green button to undo the score, it will sit there waiting until the channel is open again, and then the change will take effect. So that's why sometimes you will see as well on the electronic scoring, a score that was given during the stop clock will wait, and then the clock starts again and the score appears. And it can be quite challenging as a coach to and as a competitor certainly, to be able to focus on what's important at that moment in time.
Yeah, that's near impossible. But we see, like, even though there's big difference in the value of the scores, they're generally very close with 1 point in between, if any. So that's okay. Like, I wouldn't be too concerned with that, but it just means that when you go to hands here, then there's a big difference. So we can see that it just creeps away then. But again, very difficult situation. I think the guys just try fight it out and see what happens and just have to play it to the death. It was a time in ITF when we didn't have the live scoreboards and you just had to fight until the end anyway and didn't know what happened. So it's a throwback to older times.
Oh, there's definitely moments. But the issue, of course, is back then you couldn't go back and analyse it and see if you made the right decision or not. Now you can. And so you can agonise over it, in retrospect. And that's just a thing that you can do. Quickly, just to maybe talk about some of the numbers that we've talked about, what we normally see, and really looking at what does that mean for us as coaches and how do we advise, train, prepare our competitors. So let's start with that first thing of the work rate. So in particular, how many shots are we expecting our competitors are able to make in 2 2-minute rounds? What's good enough, do we think?
Yeah, so the numbers tell us that you need to be throwing out that 25 in each round, getting up to that 50 range. So that means you need to have a good work rate. You can start slow. That's something that kills some people. They start too slow in round 1 and then they're behind and they can't catch it back up. So that's something that you need to be aware of. Particularly, maybe you're not in the driving seat in terms of these numbers, but your opponent maybe. And then if they are, you're in big trouble. If they happen to just be a bit more passive as well, like you are, then you might get away with it.
Yeah.
But if you come up against somebody who's really nailing this higher level output that we have seen, then you're going to be in trouble.
Very important to consider as well, the competitor, what weight class are they in, or are they male or female? Because what we've seen is in the lighter weight male categories, the numbers are higher. In the heavier weight male and in the female categories, and particularly into the heavier female categories, the numbers are lower. So you'd expect that anyway. You're talking about those light, fast people put out bigger numbers. So in particular,
efficient animals as humans.
Exactly.
Bigger people are a bit more precise with their output.
Again, though, when we go to the number of contacts, it's important that you can out-contact your opponent. So in terms of physical preparation, you've got to be able to match the output that the best in your division are doing in terms of the number of shots thrown. And then there's that whole skill efficiency thing of how many of them are we actually making contact with? Are you just waving your leg for no particular reason, or are you actually making good contact with the other person and creating scoring chances, making opportunities for them to make a mistake and concede a score? So the conditioning to allow for, if we need a number and we go to an exercise scientist or a physiologist and we say, okay, what do I need to do? What's my level of fitness? Well, we need at least an output of 50 shots in 240 seconds. We need to be able to sustain that match after match after match to get through a championships. So before we even look at skill, you've got to have the capacity to put out those numbers. So that's the first thing. Let's talk a little bit about those front leg carries, because we saw a big difference male to female.
I think it's about intent. Some people, they kick at or towards in front of the opponent, but not through. So if you use the analogy of a hologram or a ghost, they're not kicking through it, they're kicking at it in front of it. And you got to also imagine that if you kick at me, I'm not going to stay there. Generally, I'm going to take that little shift back so the distance gets manipulated furthermore. So that's what we generally see from people who are not efficient with carries. But there are other reasons why people use them. So a lot of time people might get pushed back and they use it to control space or take back ring position. Or sometimes it's just ingrained as people as habits that they just lift up that leg. They don't really know why. They don't have any intent and they just use it and try to go towards the opponent with any real intent. It's just a habit ingrained in them. But we see the top fighters time and time again, they use their front leg to set something up, whether it's to get closer to use hands, whether it's to get closer to really hit a strong psychic through the opponent, or they're using it to set up another kicking technique.
Just to add one or two more small statistics onto the end of it, we've already said, but just to reiterate, the number of warnings. If you can get the number of warnings your competitors can see down below 6, you have a much better chance of not being in really tight matches right at the very end or losing on the last warning. And when we say below 6, obviously being on 5 at the end of a match is stressful, so it's much easier if you are like in the last 20 seconds on 4 or 3 and you have one to spare. So all we're really suggesting is that as coaches, you become conscious of the warning state, where you are on it, and the things that you can do to positively impact whether or not you're likely to concede a warning. So if people spin excessively for no particular reason, if it's not a good choice, if you hover on the edge of the ring, of course you're more likely to concede some warnings. People who carry a high flicky leg fall over more often, and if you have a poor response to a blitz, again, you'll tend to fall over or get spun more often. So think in terms of what are the actions that lead to giving away what we'd call those unforced errors, unnecessary warnings. They stack up, they attack you. It's going into the match with, you know, a score handed over to the other person or giving them a head start. You don't want to do that.
Will be the restarts, yeah. And like we see it happens 13 times on average, 12 to 13 times each match. The best fighters have a strategy or multiple options they can use from there. They know that not everybody is tuned in. Most people will see this as an opportunity, a verbal non-agreement, non-verbal agreement, I should say, to just let's bounce for a second and get back into the match where we left off. But the best people don't give you that opportunity. They're trying to nail you the second they can, and they will also manipulate how they can sneak in or out of the distance based on what the referee is aware of. So they can sneak in that range if the referee isn't aware. They can come out of range if they need to do a bigger shot. They can shorten their stance, whatever it may be. The common ones that I've seen as of late, people will raise that front hand, wait for you to kick, pin and trap that front leg of yours with their front hand and come over with that backhand direct counter or the hacks over the top. Generally what we see is people will do nothing as option 1. They will lift their leg or they will try to just move forward. They're generally the things that we will see. So if you can manipulate those. Another one that we see coming back in, it's something that was very prominent a while back, is the direct blitz straight off the restart. Takes bravery. You got to be sure that you have a good fast blitz, but some people are very successful with it.
So folks, hopefully that helps. Those are some of the numbers that we look at, why we think they're important, how we use them in our coaching and how we try to put them into practice in our coaching to basically take advantage of all the little percentage gains that are available there within the game so that you can be just a little bit more efficient, win more matches that you or let's say avoid losing more matches than you absolutely should, and make the very best out of the skills that you have. So again, thank you to the ITF for inviting us to speak on this 70th birthday celebration for our Taekwondo. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we can answer some questions for people in the near future. You can always reach out to either myself or Richie if anything in this episode or in this presentation gave you pause to think or some questions, and we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.
Brilliant. Thank you.